Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Rogoff, and I'm the Undersecretary at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 5th Champions of Change transportation event here at the White House. This is always a very exciting event for those of us who toil in transportation every day. It is our opportunity to really recognize the true rock stars in our field, the people who have made truly transformative, if not disruptive innovations that have changed the course of transportation here in the country. As you can see, we've been joined by a lot of the senior leadership here at the department, including the Secretary himself. And it's my pleasure to introduce a very special guest, a great advocate for our cause here in the White House and a great leader in this area, Jeff Zients, who is the director of our National Economic Council, as well as assistant to the President for Economic Policy. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I can tell you one thing, I'm not a rock star, but I am the director of the National Economic Council, and I spent a lot of time thinking about our economy and where we are from a competitive position in the global economy. And you know, our position is quite strong, and it's driven by what's been some traditional strengths and innovation. So we have 15 of the top 25 research universities here in the U.S. About a third of research and development in the world comes from the U.S., as does about a third of patents. So our source of competitive advantage and innovation is distinct, and we have to fight hard to maintain that because it's a competitive environment, but it's a real source of strength. We also have the world's most productive workforce. So we're 40% more productive than Germany, 2 to 3 times more productive than South Korea and China. If we were here a decade or two ago, I think we would have talked about a vulnerability in the area of energy. And boy, have things changed. We are now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas in the world. And that benefit accrues to our manufacturers or others in energy-intensive industries, as we have a tens of billions of dollar cost advantage versus our global competitors. I think if we were here a couple decades ago, we also would have talked about a comparative strength in infrastructure. That's no longer the case at the level it once was, in that we are now 12th in the world in terms of quality of infrastructure. We're not very good at being number 12. We're used to being number 1, and we're no longer number 1, we're number 12. So that's concerning. And on current course and speed, we're going to have about $1 trillion deficit of investment of what we need by 2020. So $1 trillion deficit. So I think it's very clear that we're not making the right level of investments, and that has real costs. It has real costs for American households. After housing, transportation is now the single largest expense facing American households. For businesses, if you just look at the cost of freight, transportation alone, we're spending about $27 billion more than we should be, given the state of our infrastructure. And that's not good for the competitiveness of our businesses in the global economy. And for all of us, we spend an estimated 5.5 billion hours in traffic, wasted in traffic each year. That represents about $120 billion in extra fuel and lost opportunity time. So I don't think anyone in this room, this is not preaching to the choir, as the president would say, this is preaching to the preacher in terms of the need to invest in our infrastructure. And the president, the vice president, Secretary Foxx have been pushing Congress to do just that. And you know, unfortunately, we're in this bad cycle of where Congress is, rather than making the long-term investments at the right level, instead we're in this period of patching. I think we've done 34 short-term patches in a row. And we all know that's no way to fund infrastructure or run a government. And it's been disruptive, to say the least, to all of you who are on the ground making things happen. The good news is, while Congress hasn't been doing their job, people around the country haven't been waiting. And leaders at the state and local level are doing everything you can to make every dollar that you do have most impactful, finding innovative ways to address emerging challenges and get the highest return on every dollar spent. And that goes right back where I started, which is innovation and the source of competitive advantage we have in the world because of our propensity to innovate, to be entrepreneurial. And that's incredibly important in transportation. And it's what makes everybody so excited to be here today. As Peter said, we have the best of the best in this room. People who have said, yep, it's a tough environment out there, but I'm going to be resourceful, I'm going to be innovative, and I'm going to just make things work. And it's exciting to have you here, and your energy and your innovation is contagious. And as champions of change, you represent exactly what we need in this country, which are people who are feet on the ground, innovating and making every dollar count, being more efficient and more innovative. So while today is to celebrate you and your accomplishments, we also want to use it as an opportunity to lift up your work so that others can copy and do just what you're doing, literally what you're doing, and spread your innovative practices around the country, because what works in Tulsa and Chicago can also work in Fort Lauderdale and Philadelphia. So again, I want to both thank you and congratulate you. It's a big deal what you're doing, and you're an example for all of us and heroes for all of us. Speaking of real rock stars and a real champion, that's Secretary Anthony Foxx. We partner on lots of issues, none more important than what we're talking about today, and it's great to have Anthony as a colleague and friend. So our Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Foxx.
Thank you, Jeff, and I want to thank all of you for being here today. This is really a big day, big deal for the Department of Transportation and the administration to have so many of you here. And Peter, I want to thank you for getting us kicked off. We've been preparing for this day for quite a while. And one of the reasons is that, as Jeff alluded, while things can sometimes get stuck here in Washington, back out in the rest of America, folks haven't gotten the memo that there are things this country can't do. And despite the winds of resistance and the crossfires of destabilizing casual empiricism, if you will, that America isn't in a position to build the infrastructure we need in the future. You got folks out in this country that are still fighting hard every day to see those innovations and to see that build out happen. And so we celebrate you. I also want to thank the administration, the White House, for having us here today. I don't know about you, but it is always a big deal to come to the White House and to be recognized as a champion of change is a very remarkable thing. I've heard about and read about each of the champions of change and their incredible achievements. And I know that Scott, Marie-Therese, Chip will recognize each of you in a moment, maybe Mark. But first I want to say a few words about this amazing group. As I said before, we hold this event each and every year and present these awards. But this year, and these individuals that we will recognize today are unique. This year we selected the theme of the Champions of Change to be Beyond Traffic, Innovators in Transportation. This idea is derived from the Beyond Traffic Report, a framework which examines the trends and choices facing America's transportation infrastructure over the next 3 decades. Now, I want to pause here for a moment to talk a little bit about the Beyond Traffic Report and put it in context. The U.S. Department of Transportation has from time to time done long-range studies of U.S. transportation challenges. Actually, as I've done some research, this is something that had been done in government only once before Secretary Coleman started this back in the middle 1970s, and that was by Albert Gallatin back in the 1800s. First comprehensive survey of U.S. transportation challenges and choices. But we do this work because every now and then the country needs a mindset change. We need to think about where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And it's interesting to note that since Secretary Coleman's report back in the middle 1970s, America is changing a little bit. One example is that in the middle 1970s, population was flocking out of cities into rural areas of the country. Today, we're seeing the exact opposite trend of folks flocking from wherever they're coming from into metro areas around the country. This has dramatic implications in how we think about the build out of our infrastructure. Take a community like Los Angeles, where the ability to widen any more of the freeways is severely constrained. And so the choices there become ones of multimodalism. How do you integrate transportation choice in a relatively constrained area of land use? And what happens in Los Angeles eventually will happen in other metro areas around the country. And so what lessons does that tell us about the Southeast, which is one of the fastest growing regions of the country? What does it tell us about the need to maintain the multimodal systems we have had and traditionally have had in the Midwestern communities and the Northeastern communities in this country? So we did this report to basically give the nation a physical exam of its infrastructure and to begin to assess how the country needs to move forward. And the import of that in terms of the champions of change is that, again, as I said, we have folks around the country that have already looked ahead, that are already figuring out what's around the corner, and are working vigorously to make sure the country responds effectively to those challenges and makes the right choices. So recently, my team and I have been traveling all over the country to talk to folks about this Beyond Traffic report. We've been going to growing metropolitan areas, what you might call mega regions, that we already know are in the process of experiencing tremendous growth. The transportation infrastructure in these places is already struggling to keep up with current demand. So the risk is that if we don't act, the system will be even more constrained in the future. And so the forums we've hosted in these locations have been very productive. We've acquired valuable feedback from folks on the ground and the people who know their transportation systems the best. And it's also become evident that we are going to need some serious creative and innovative solutions to keep this country moving, to keep our economy moving, and to continue the upward trajectory of quality of life in America. Now, I realize I don't need to lecture this group on those things. You already know a great deal about these challenges and choices. And as I said before, some of you have been helping us move better by creating more transportation access. You've worked to expand bicycle infrastructure, for example, promote walkability, make transit systems more far-reaching and efficient in your respective communities. Some of you have worked to build infrastructure and coordinate organizations to help us move things better. Your vision has opened intermodal facilities, and this has not only improved the movement of freight, it's also created job opportunities for real-life American people. Your leadership has also formed the productive relationships among different partners who were involved in our inland waterways so we can use those systems more effectively and efficiently. You've worked to innovate existing transportation infrastructure and in some cases to create entirely new options. Some of you have devoted your careers to researching and developing connected and automated vehicles. And from my vantage point, I hope you're very successful with this because my 11-year-old will become 16 in 5 years, and I very much would like her to take advantage of automated vehicles. Others have invented materials to help us build safe bridges more cheaply and quickly than ever before, and you've served as tireless proponents of all things safety. You've done this work by continuing to ensure that the protection of our children is at a very high level, particularly as they travel, or by being knowledge resources for pipeline safety to many different stakeholders. All of you are champions of change because you're showing us a new direction for our country's transportation infrastructure. You're showing us what Beyond Traffic tells us, which is that as great as we've been as a country and as strong as our infrastructure has been, it's been the product of people looking out, looking forward, thinking about what's coming around the corner and doing something about it. And today we celebrate those who are already doing that. So I want to thank you again on behalf of President Obama and all of us at USDOT. I look forward to having all of you come up so I can shake your hands and thank you personally. And even more importantly than that, for those who are watching or read about this event today, I want to say that this is also an example of how everyday people, regardless of their walk of life, some are researchers, some are advocates, but all of us can contribute to making America's infrastructure the very best in the world. And so thank you very much for your great example. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the team.
I now have the privilege of introducing Habib Dagher. He is the Director of Advanced Structures and Composites Center at the University of Maine. Dr. Dagher has been instrumental in development of advanced structural systems, and his team at the University of Maine designed Bridge in a Backpack, which uses innovative and lightweight bridge materials to help construct new bridges in an efficient and innovative way. So I'm just going to begin by introducing myself. Greg Nadeau, I'm the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, and I'm pleased to be here. Our secretary and our deputy secretary expect one thing of all our operating administrations: to be innovative. Not only do they expect it, they demand it of us. People like this are who we depend on as practitioners to make it happen out there in the field where it counts. So I want to start by asking all of our panelists, and take a minute or so to answer this overall question. Just give us an overview of the work you do to lead innovation in your particular world.
Hello, I'm Habib Dagher, Director of the Composites Center at the University of Maine. The true champions in my case are at Maine today. They're the students, the faculty, and staff who've been working with me for the last 20 years to make these ideas come to reality. We started the center back in 1996 through a National Science Foundation grant. And the goal is to figure out how to build things faster, build them cheaper, and build them with a smaller environmental footprint. And the Bridge in a Backpack technology is one example that I'll talk about next on how we've achieved that. Thank you.
You have both developed innovative ways for states to quickly and efficiently and safely build and reconstruct bridges throughout the country. In a industry discipline that is so fairly conservative, you've made some real strides. Can you elaborate on how your work will benefit the nation's transportation infrastructure system in the future? And you can address that same question separately since you're both in the same business.
Sure. So Greg, thank you very much. If you live in Maine like I do, and you look around, our construction seasons are very short. You're looking about 6 to 7 months at best to go build your bridge and do it right. It takes a heck of a lot longer sometimes to do that. So we've been looking at ways to make build bridges a lot faster. So we developed with the idea of a bridge in a backpack, a bridge that could be done very quickly. So think about 15 hockey bags, each with a 70-foot span arch in a bag that come on a pickup truck. and an air compressor to inflate them on site, bend them to shape, infuse them with the resin. Within 3 hours, these tubes, hollow tubes, are twice the strength of steel. Then you can fill them full of concrete on site and get the bridge built very quickly. People thought we were crazy. And actually, I like that now. When people say you're crazy, I know we're into something here, onto something. So, but we did get it done. It's in the AASHTO code today. And then Brits Valbera, who's in the room here, has commercialized the technology. We've got 20 of these bridges out there. And people like it, engineers like it, but change is easy. It's not easy. But I think the biggest and most difficult piece is not just the innovation, but bringing the change into reality. And we've made some strides, and I'd like to get Britt up here, if you don't mind raising your hand here. Britt and the team are the ones really working with the DOTs one-on-one and building these bridges. And he's built them in Michigan, he's built them in the Northeast United States, soon in Pennsylvania. And we even shipped bridges in a 20-foot shipping container with one engineer and got them built in 2 weeks overseas. So it can be done. We look forward to keep doing more of that in the future. Thank you.
I've got one more question that I'd sort of like to ask to the entire panel. We'll start with Jim. And basically, it's all of you have worked in partnerships to initiate, implement, execute the concepts that brought you to this table today. Can you talk a little bit about, from your experience, how to develop those partnerships, how to engage them, how do you get going when you've got concepts that have obviously been as effective and successful as yours?
In our case, bringing the bridge in back to reality, it took finding the right partners. The Maine DOT was the right partner for us to start with. They worked with us very closely to get it up to the next level, built the first bridge with them, and then they became the advocates. They went out there and they started telling everybody else, you know what? You guys got to try a bridge, and now all of a sudden we've got a number of DOTs across the country doing the same. So we also have the private sector involved as well. It's very important. Now we've got contractors who are also building these bridges and say, well, it takes a lot less time to do this. Let's go tell other contractors, let's go build these bridges. So it really started with a nucleus, and it started an avalanche, if you wish. We hope to keep this avalanche going. Thank you.
Add one more thing to your response. I was just thinking, I'm going to probably go back and wrap this up on the same question that Dr. Rosekind asked, and that was young people and how do we attract them to this profession. You're in the business of teaching young people as a professional discipline, and have scores, maybe hundreds of engineers who have participated in this research over the years for you. What impact does that have on the engineering community in your state? And I'd like you to touch on that too, if you could, Arduran.
Thanks for asking the question, Greg. And if I were to look back at 20 years of work, one of the biggest accomplishments in our lab is we funded over 1,800 students who worked in our lab to develop these new technologies. And now they're out there right now. You watch out for them. They're all fireballs, and they're ready to go out and make the change happen. So, and it's just, there's nothing more exciting to see these young people go out there armed with new technologies, new ideas. And at the Maine DOT, they actually changed the culture. They're out there asking for these bridges in the backpack. They're saying, we got to go build these. And that's really a big part of changes, is creating these young people and getting them out there. Thank you.
And I watched them do it when I was deputy commissioner at Maine DOT. It is from the university to the practice, influencing greatly sort of the outlook of the engineering community.